Please pray with me. God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So my favorite TV show is Modern Family, and one of their greatest episodes dealt with parents speaking to their children about sex. One of the families featured is a husband, wife, 2 daughters, and a son. The kids in this family attempt to surprise their parents on their anniversary by making them breakfast in bed. You see where this is going. The 3 of them have the breakfast neatly piled up on a tray. They head up the stairs, open the door to their parents' bedroom, yelling, "Happy anniversary!" and catch their parents in the act. They run away screaming, with the 2 oldest daughters knowing exactly what they just interrupted and the son having no clue. Once safely downstairs in the kitchen, the son asks, "What were Mom and Dad doing?" The middle daughter quickly responds, "Nothing." To which the son thinks about it for a second and then says, "Whatever it was, it looked like Dad was winning." The girls scream even louder, and as they are just chaotic and so stressed, they end up explaining to their brother what just happened as they wash their eyes out at the kitchen sink. Now, this is funny in and of itself, but what makes the episode so incredibly human is that the parents spend the rest of the day trying to figure out how to speak to their children about what they saw. The parents feel compelled to talk about it because they don't want their kids to have unhealthy views of the body or sexuality. The episode ends with a big family meeting. The kids just block out the entire conversation, smile and nod at everything their parents are trying to convey about sex and love, and then just move on with their lives. Human sexuality, lust, romantic love. We haven't always excelled at speaking about these topics in our own families, let alone in the church. In fact, we have inherited some incredibly unhealthy views of sexuality from some of the most influential Christian thinkers. St. Augustine is notorious for his sexual issues. He's the saint who said, "God grant me chastity and continence, but not yet." Augustine had a mistress and a child with her, and then later abandoned her and took their son away. Very saintly behavior right there. In his Confessions, he wrote, "At one time in adolescence, I was burning to find satisfaction in hellish pleasures. I ran wild in the shadowy jungle of erotic adventures." If there was one deadly sin Augustine struggled with, it was lust. And because this was his most troublesome sin, and he became such an influential theologian, the whole church inherited some of his baggage and didn't question this for centuries. Today's passage from Colossians is a great example of early Christianity's troubled sexual views in line with Augustine. Colossians is one of the disputed letters of Paul. Some scholars think Paul wrote it, others don't buy it, but nevertheless it gets to our deadly sin of lust. The author of Colossians says, "Put to death, therefore, whatever in you is earthly, fornication, impurity, passion, evil desire, and greed," which is idolatry. "On account of these, the wrath of God is coming to those who are disobedient." The author is trying to make the distinction between death and life, between earthly impulses and heavenly ones. Once you became a baptized Christian, you'd leave these old vices behind. The author encourages early believers to set your mind on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. If this view is taken to extremes, as it unfortunately was in the history of the church, this should trouble us. The author presents this list of vices, most of them sexual in nature, and then eventually describes what it means to be living the good life. The implication is that once you became a true Christian, you would be able to overcome these earthly, bodily, sinful vices. This was actually why many early Christians wouldn't get baptized until they were literally on their deathbed. Because as you're dying, you can't really sin that bad, right? And then you get into heaven. This was the thinking. Colossians also exemplifies the soul-body dualism so present in early Christianity. As theologian Christine Gudorf describes it, the self was identified with the soul, mind, will, and the body was understood to represent a lower animal nature that was to be possessed and controlled by the rational spiritual will. There's some sexism here. Men were seen to be in the mind-soul category, the heavenly one. Women in the body-feelings category, the earthly one. Men, controlled by the rational spiritual will, naturally had to keep women in line since they were subject to their bodies and feelings, right? I almost choked on that last line. Are we seeing how dangerous this theology is? And I hate to tell you this. There are many who still think in these dangerous, antiquated, dualistic ways. Wives, submit to your husbands, and all that crap. These list of vices found in Colossians, with the deadly sin of lust being prominent among them, are common throughout the New Testament. The body is bad, sinful, supposed to be controlled at all times, while the soul is good and heavenly. One group of Christians, the Gnostics, took this dualistic thinking so far that they declared that Jesus didn't even have a body. He was some sort of spirit person walking the earth. They were later declared heretics, so at least their theology wasn't affirmed by the church. But that's where this way of thinking, of the soul in opposition to the body, can lead us. Needless to say, the deadly sin of lust and our issues with sexuality in the church were present from the very beginning. I explored Colossians and Augustine a little bit with you, but there's so much more to be said. It's no wonder that it's still taking time to challenge some of these views. But there's hope on the horizon. Sexuality is now understood by many modern theologians within the confines of human embodiment. Again, Christine Gudorf argues if our bodies are not possessions of ourselves, but are ourselves, then the sexed nature of human bodies makes us sexual persons. New questions are being asked, as opposed to whether or not sexual activity is between heterosexual persons married to one another for the purpose of procreation, as was deemed the only kind of sex acceptable for centuries. Now, modern theological questions are whether or not the relationship itself is caring, mutual, consensual, and responsible. We can thank many feminist theologians who affirmed that anti-sexual and misogynistic attitudes need to be challenged. We're living in a new era, and our own United Church of Christ is one of the denominations at the forefront of this theological shift. The UCC and the Unitarian Universalist Association partnered on a new sex ed curriculum several years ago called Our Whole Lives, or OWL. This curriculum actually helps people of all ages make decisions about relationships and behavior in the context of their own faith and beliefs. OWL covers the areas of human development, relationships, personal skills, sexual behavior, sexual health, and society and culture. I think that St. Augustine would have been a huge fan of OWL, because it comes at sex and faith in a much healthier way, rather than the either-or mentality he wrestled with his whole life. In the end, Robin Myers emphasizes that between the deadly sin of lust and the life-denying charade of chastity lies holy eros. The Greeks spoke of eros as the magnetism that holds the whole universe together. Human love merely draws from this ocean of cosmic desire. Mark Gaffney, the spiritual teacher and scholar, says, yes, eros is sexual, but it also transcends the sexual. Eros actually means all the places where I am fully present, on the inside, yearning and connected. Maybe we can see the holiness present when two people covenant together and have mutuality about their relationship. Maybe we can see that our bodies are sacred and holy. We are somehow made of divine substance. Myers ends with the conviction that in this sexually dysfunctional world, holy eros is the virtue we need, and it should be regarded, first and last, as a gift from God. Thanks be to God, and may it be so. Amen.